The quarantine alarm shrieked just as Olivia Smith pushed through the Lab 7 airlock. Red emergency lights painted everything the color of a migraine, and the automated voice that had never failed in her 3 months aboard the Meridian station was now actively failing her. Containment breach. Containment breach. Evacuate Sector 7 immediately. Well, that's not good, Olivia muttered, though she kept walking forward. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Behind her, the airlock hissed shut with the finality of a closing coffin. Commander Kael'thas's voice exploded through the comm system, crystalline undertones of his Kaelian physiology making his panic sound like breaking glass. Smith, return to the airlock. The containment field is compromised. I repeat, compromised. And we have an active specimen in Lab 7. Olivia was already in Lab 7. What she saw defied the 17 hours of briefing materials that had been hammered into her skull during orientation. According to every document, every report, every official classification in the Galactic Treaty of Species Interaction, what she was looking at should not exist in any configuration that included her still being alive. A predator cub, a Sinlar juvenile, all scaled muscle and predatory geometry, was climbing up her left arm like it was a tree. "Oh, hey, buddy," Olivia said, because it was either speak or scream, and she'd learned long ago that screaming rarely improved situations. "That's quite an entrance," the creature chirped. It was a small sound, confused, and absolutely not the neurotoxin-laced shriek that the training videos had suggested would be the last thing a human ever heard. Its claws, the ones rated at 8,000 pounds of pressure capable of slicing through reinforced plating, prickled gently against the fabric of her thermal suit as it repositioned itself on her shoulder. "Smith!" Kael'thas was shouting now, his command authority cracking like actual crystal. "What is your status? Are you injured? Report." "Still breathing," Olivia said conversationally, reaching into her pocket. "Vitals probably look normal because they are normal. This little guy isn't trying to kill me." In the background of the comm channel, she heard someone, probably the biologist, Vex Thul, based on the academic tenor of the panic, practically choking. Her vital signs are normal? How is she? The morphology alone should trigger an autonomic predatory response. The neural cascade. The neural cascade probably stopped cascading because I'm not acting like I'm about to be eaten, Olivia interrupted, producing a protein bar from her pocket. She'd grabbed it from the break room on her way down. Some instinct about never approaching an unknown animal without something it might want. Apparently, that instinct translated across interstellar species. Has anyone tried not screaming at it? The cub's head snapped toward the protein bar with intensity. Its nostrils flared. For a moment, Olivia felt a flutter of genuine concern. The training videos did show pretty dramatic hunting behavior. But then the creature did something no predator was supposed to do. It waited. It wanted the food. She could see the desire radiating off it in the tension of its scaled body. But it waited for her to open the bar, to break off a piece, to indicate that this was acceptable prey, not prey. It was asking. "Okay," Olivia said softly, breaking the bar and holding up a chunk. "Nice and easy." The cub took it from her palm with surgical precision. Its teeth, each one a natural blade, didn't so much as brush her skin. It chewed thoughtfully, making a sound that could almost be described as contented. Vex Thul's voice crackled through the comm, and now it had the strained quality of someone's entire professional foundation experiencing a controlled demolition. Stop moving immediately. Every motion you make will trigger the predatory response cascade. The creature is currently in a neurological dead zone. Any stimulation will activate the predatory response cascade is triggered by threat perception, Olivia said, feeding the cub another piece of protein bar. It was making that contented sound again, rhythmic and almost musical. Pretty sure we're not in that category right now. What's your name, little one? It does not have a name, Smith, Kyle Thos said, his voice taking on the careful tone of someone addressing someone they suspected might be critically injured and delusional. The Sinlar do not form social attachments. They do not have individual identities. They are extinction-level predatory swarms that... Olivia reached up with her free hand and scratched gently behind where the cub's ears would be, if it had ears. It had something. Vestigial bone structures, the biologist in her noted idly. The cub made an entirely new sound, a kind of thrumming that she felt through her hand. Kyle thus actually made a noise that might have been him choking on crystalline fluids. "Commander," Vex Thule said quietly, "the creature is vibrating at approximately 47 hertz. That frequency profile matches..." The biologist's voice cracked. "That matches the Sinlar calming response that we theorized could only be achieved through social bonding," Olivia finished helpfully, as the cub climbed higher up her shoulder, tucking itself into the curve of her neck like it had found the exact spot it needed all along. Turns out, it wants the same thing every other thinking creature wants. Someone who isn't trying to kill it. The silence that followed was the kind of profound that made the red emergency lights seem even more red, if that was possible. "Commander?" Zara said hesitantly, her young voice the only one that sounded like it was still functioning in normal space-time. "What do we do?" Kyle Thas took a moment before answering. When he did, he sounded like someone watching their entire career get carefully dismantled one protein bar at a time. "We observe and document carefully." "Already on it," Olivia said, giving the cub one final scratch. It had settled completely now, its weight a comfortable presence against her shoulder, its breath warm even through her suit. "And Smith," Kael'thas added quietly. "Yeah? Please tell me you have more protein bars." Olivia grinned despite the chaos. "Always prepared. That's the animal shelter worker way." "Deploy Protocol Alpha," Kael'thas commanded, his crystalline voice now sharp enough to cut. "Neurological sedation, full strength. Move." Through the lab's observation window, Olivia watched a robotic arm descend with something that looked like a pressurized syringe. She didn't flinch. The cub, however, noticed the motion and made a low, inquisitive sound. Not a threat, just curiosity. It tilted its scaled head. The injection hit the cub's shoulder. For exactly 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the creature looked down at the injection site with what could only be described as mild annoyance. And the tranquilizer that should have dropped a creature 3 times its size seemed to simply not work. "Metabolic adaptation confirmed." Vex Thule's voice crackled through the speakers, now hitting frequencies that suggested academic panic was approaching critical mass. "The specimen's cellular chemistry is actively rejecting the compound. It's synthesizing a counteragent in real time. That shouldn't be biologically possible. That violates fundamental principles of... We're looking at it, violating it anyway." Zara interrupted quietly, still monitoring vital signs. "The sedation levels are dropping. The creature is processing the neurotoxin faster than our injection rate." Kyle Thas didn't skip a beat. "Protocol Beta, separation field. Now. The lab filled with a low hum as energy barriers materialized between Olivia and the monitoring station. Military-grade containment, the kind that cost approximately 17 trillion credits per installation. The kind that had held hostile species in place during the Outer Rim conflicts. The cub walked through it like it wasn't there. How? Vexthul's voice cracked audibly. The field is active. I'm reading full power output. It's not malfunctioning. The creature is simply moving through solid energy barriers like they're Tuesday, Olivia finished. Because at this point, why not be conversational about the complete destruction of alien military technology? The cub was now actively exploring the lab, poking at equipment with surprising gentleness for something with claws rated at 8,000 pounds of cutting force. Neat trick, little buddy. This is impossible, Vexthul whispered. The spatial molecular interaction shouldn't allow. Deploy Protocol Gamma, Kelthos said, and Olivia heard something new in his voice. Not panic, not yet, but the foundation-cracking sound of someone whose entire worldview was tilting sideways. Neurological disruption, full spectrum. A different sound filled the lab. Not painful. Olivia didn't feel anything. But it made her teeth ache slightly, the way a dental drill does when you know, intellectually, it's not touching you, but your body doesn't quite believe it. The cub, however, seemed to find it fascinating. It stopped its exploration, tilted its head, and began to hum. Not an aggressive shriek, not a predatory growl, a hum. A low, harmonic frequency that seemed to resonate with the disruption field, creating a harmony that shouldn't have been acoustically possible. It's singing. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. It's not singing, Vexthul said, his scientific training warring with auditory evidence that contradicted 17 different peer-reviewed studies. The vocal cords of a Sinlar juvenile don't possess the structural capacity to produce harmonic frequencies. The neurological mapping suggests they can only emit predatory vocalizations with a specific frequency curve designed to sound scary, Olivia suggested, walking over to the cub. It was still humming, and up close, she could see the small scales along its throat vibrating in synchronization. But maybe if you don't have a predatory brain screaming at you, it occurs to you to try something else? She reached out and gently scratched the spot behind the cub's head structure. The vestigial ear area, she was starting to understand. The humming intensified, becoming almost musical. Turn off the neurological disruptor, she said calmly. Absolutely not, Kelthos responded. But his voice had taken on a quality of someone watching their protocols fail in real time and beginning to suspect that the fault lay in the protocols, not the creature. It's responding to the frequency, Vexthul said quietly, his voice now carrying the tone of someone whose career was experiencing a controlled demolition in front of witnesses. The specimen is using the disruption field as a stimulus for what appears to be a calming vocalization. This suggests self-awareness, neurological complexity, intentional emotional regulation, which suggests it's sentient, Olivia filled in, which means it learns, which means it's curious, which means it probably wants to understand why a bunch of stuff just showed up and started trying to knock it unconscious. Through the labcom, a new voice crackled, older, higher authority, the kind that made even Kelthos's tone shift slightly into something more formal. Commander, explain the current situation. Sir, Kelthos said carefully. The human specimen is currently engaged in what appears to be behavioral modification of the Sinlar juvenile. All containment protocols have failed. The creature is non-responsive to sedation, field barriers, and neurological disruption. However, it is responding positively to interaction. There was a pause, a long, profound pause. Then, positive interaction with a class extinction predator? Yes, sir. Another pause. Kill them both. Olivia's hand froze, mid-scratch, which caused the cub to trill in confusion. A questioning sound, gentle and uncertain. Wait, she said, not bothering with the comm, but knowing they could hear her. Why? It's just curious. They're sentient, right? So it's trying to learn. It hasn't hurt me. It's literally just hanging out on my shoulder, waiting to see what's next. That sounds like peaceful coexistence to me. Humans carry bacterial vectors that... The senior authority began. Yeah, and we all survived it. Olivia interrupted, her voice level and matter-of-fact. So clearly the universe did too. If cross-species bacterial exchange was an extinction event, we would have noticed by now. We've been around other aliens for the better part of 3 centuries. Vex Thule made a sound like someone laughing and choking simultaneously. She's arguing for the creature's life based on epidemiological logic and the continued survival of human civilization. She's arguing for both their lives, Zara corrected quietly, based on the simple observation that nothing is actually going wrong right now. The cub made that questioning trill again, and Olivia resumed scratching. It climbed higher on her shoulder, settling into the curve of her neck like it had found exactly the right spot. Its humming resumed, quieter now, almost intimate. Sir, Kael'thas said slowly, I recommend observation. The authority on the comm waited so long before responding that Olivia wondered if the connection had dropped. Finally, very well. But if that creature harms anyone... It won't, Olivia said with absolute certainty. Because it's not scary, it's just scared. And all it needed was someone to treat it like something that could think instead of something that just kills. In the silence that followed, the only sound was the cub's soft humming, and the quiet hum of military-grade containment systems that had just met something that didn't follow any protocol anyone had ever written. Vex Thule entered Lab 7 wearing a containment suit that cost approximately 400,000 credits. He was prepared for horror. He was prepared for tragedy. He was prepared for the final hours of his career before a dishonorable discharge. What he was not prepared for was Olivia Smith teaching the Predator cub to navigate a simple obstacle course made from stacked equipment boxes. Okay, buddy, up and over, Olivia said, guiding the cub with nothing but a chunk of protein bar and gentle hand gestures. The creature, which should have been shredding her into component atoms, hopped over the first box with the enthusiasm of a puppy learning fetch. Good, yes, that's exactly right. Vex Thule's antennae, which had been quivering with suppressed panic all morning, went completely still. Dr. Vex Thule, Olivia said without even looking up, you look like you're having a medical event. You okay? The biologist moved closer to the obstacle course, his 6 sensory organs all tracking the cub's movements simultaneously. The creature was learning, not just surviving interaction with a human, actively learning behavioral patterns, adjusting its approach based on positive feedback, displaying what could only be described as problem-solving enthusiasm. In my 40 years of study, Vex Thule said slowly, like each word was being individually wrung from his understanding of reality, I have never observed a similar specimen exhibiting behavioral modification. The neuroplasticity data suggests their cognitive architecture is fixed, immutable. This shouldn't be possible in less than evolutionary timescales. Hundreds of generations. Yet you've accomplished it in... He checked his chronometer with the precision of someone watching their life's work implode. 3 hours. Evolution's one way to learn, Olivia said, moving the protein bar further along the course. The cub eagerly followed, performing a small leap that would have seemed impossible for something that size just yesterday. Immediate positive reinforcement is faster. Why would you use the slow method? Because, Vexthul said, and his voice carried the weight of 40 years of institutional confidence collapsing. Nothing in our understanding allows for the fast method. Commander, Olivia called out, not bothering with the comm. She just spoke to the ceiling where she knew the cameras were. This is working. Should I keep going? Kyle Thas's response came immediately. Terminate this experiment immediately. The specimen cannot be allowed to... Why? Olivia interrupted, her tone still conversational despite the escalating crisis. It's working. Look at the stress indicators. They're dropping. The cub's engaging in play behavior. It's not trying to kill anything. It's learning. What's the actual problem here? The silence that followed was the kind of profound that seemed to have weight. Vexthul could feel it pressing down through the laboratory, through the station, into the cosmic void beyond. When Kyle Thas finally spoke, his crystalline voice had dropped to something almost conversational. The problem is, you're proving our entire biological classification system wrong. Zara's hands were shaking as she uploaded the neural data to the central analysis system. The cub's neurochemistry is rebalancing in real time. She reported, her voice steady despite the tremor in her appendages. Stress hormones are decreasing. Bonding neurochemicals are increasing. The neural structures associated with aggression are showing decreased activation patterns, while areas associated with learning and social cognition are lighting up. The medical team lead, a Vexthul specialist named Sinara, made a sound of academic distress. That's not possible. Neural structures don't reorganize themselves based on social stimuli. That would require fundamental rewiring of... They literally do, Olivia called over the comm, apparently having upgraded from ceiling speaking to active participation in every crisis at once. Every mammalian species we've worked with responds to socialization. Early childhood development is basically just neural rewiring based on environmental feedback. You're saying these have mammalian traits? Yes, Vexthul answered quietly. But with predatory amplification that should make socialization lethal. The aggression cascade should overwhelm any calming influence. The neurotoxin production alone should, Olivia repeated. But is it? Because I'm still alive. The cub's still choosing not to kill me. That means your should is based on incomplete data. A station biologist, whose name tag identified him as K-Rex, pulled up the legal documentation with trembling hands. This violates the Treaty of Kashai. The predator cub's classification as a class extinction creature requires mandatory immediate termination upon any uncontrolled contact. We can't just teach it not to kill people. Is the classification based on actual evidence? Olivia asked. Or on, we tried once 300 years ago, and it was scary. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of someone pointing out that the Emperor was, in fact, completely naked. We tried once, Kael'thas said quietly, his voice like breaking ice. 300 years ago, all handlers died. And no one tried again. Olivia's tone wasn't accusatory. It was genuinely curious, which somehow made it worse. Just decided these things were unfixable based on one incident? Vexthul's antennae drooped. They're not meant to be fixed. They're meant to be feared. The override order came through from High Station Command at 1447 hours. Activate neurological override protocols. The voice on the comm was ancient, authoritative, the sound of someone who had made policy for longer than most species had existed. Attempt behavioral disruption. If the specimen becomes hostile, sterilize the entire lab section. Olivia watched as the laboratory's systems activated. Electronic deterrents designed to cause pain through targeted neural disruption. Harmonic frequencies calculated to trigger predatory aggression. The full arsenal of humane euthanasia protocols for things that weren't supposed to be alive anyway. The cub looked at the activated deterrents with mild confusion, then simply ignored them. The electronic fields passed through it like it was made of something they couldn't quite detect. The harmonic frequencies caused it to tilt its head, considering, before it began to hum in harmony with the disruption. "It's not working," Zara whispered. "Of course it's not working," Olivia said. She sounded less surprised than disappointed. "You're trying to control something by making it suffer. That makes it scared, not compliant. Or, we could try something radical." "What?" Kyle Thas's voice was barely a murmur. "Document this," Olivia said simply. "Establish behavioral protocols. Stop treating learning creatures like weapons. Maybe try talking to them first before assuming the worst. Worked out pretty well so far." "You're suggesting we've been wrong," Kyle Thas said slowly, "about an entire species classification." "I'm suggesting," Olivia corrected gently, "that you were wrong based on fear instead of evidence. And now you have evidence. The question is what you do with it." Vexthul looked at the cub, which had curled up contentedly against Olivia's leg, humming softly. 40 years of study. 40 years of understanding that these creatures were incurable, impossible, extinction-level threats. 40 years of being completely wrong. "If the predator cubs can be integrated," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of realization spreading outward like a stone dropped in still water, "then what about the kale tool? What about the guy moth? What about every species we classified as dangerous based on historical incidents that might have been just as misunderstood?" The silence that followed was not the silence of crisis anymore. It was the silence of an entire civilization realizing it had built its entire military doctrine on a fundamental misunderstanding of what dangerous actually meant. Vexthul stood in the laboratory, staring at the cub like it was a question that rewrote every answer he'd ever known. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't they kill you? In the first microsecond of contact? The neural cascade should have initiated. The predatory response should have been instantaneous, automatic, neurologically hardwired past any conscious override." Olivia shrugged, which caused the cub to bounce excitedly at the motion. She scratched behind its ears while she answered. "Why would they? I wasn't a threat. I didn't come in here armed. I didn't make aggressive moves. I treated them like a thinking being, not a target. But our understanding of predatory neural pathways," Zara began, "seems to be based on bad data," Olivia finished gently. "What if your early contacts were with cubs already traumatized? What if the stress actually made them dangerous instead of being their nature? You keep acting like aggression is their baseline. But what if fear is?" Vexthul made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been the audio equivalent of his professional foundation imploding. 40 years. 40 years of studies, papers, peer-reviewed certainties, institutional confidence built on the assumption that predatory nature was immutable. "You're saying we caused the aggression?" Kyle Thas said quietly, not as a question, but as a realization dawning like a star collapsing inward. "The first handlers tried to kill them. The cubs defended themselves. We interpreted that as proof they were extinction-level threats instead of... He trailed off. Instead of what? Olivia prompted. Instead of scared, Kael'thas finished. The cub made a sound, complex, layered, with harmonic undertones that the laboratory's translation systems had to recalibrate in real time to process. Contentment observed. Social bonding affirmed. Additional interaction requested, the translation matrix reported, its confidence level climbing as the data clarified. Emotional state. Curious. Behavioral indicators. Non-aggressive. Species classification assessment requires revision. See? Olivia said, and she was smiling now, the kind of smile that came from being right about the fundamental nature of living things. It wanted a friend, not a fight. You gave it soldiers instead. Zara was already moving through the containment bay, her young hands steady as she began following Olivia's established protocols with the other specimen cubs. Food introduction, play stimulation, non-threatening contact. Each one a radical departure from standard containment procedure. The cohort is responding positively, Zara reported, her voice carrying notes of scientific wonder. All specimens are exhibiting the same behavioral plasticity. Stress indicators dropping across the board. Bonding vocalizations increasing. They're learning. Vexthul watched through the observation window, his antennae trembling with what might have been awe, or might have been the sensation of watching an entire career restructure itself in real time. The cubs were thriving. Not just surviving the presence of non-hostile contact, actively thriving, engaging in play behaviors, vocalizing in increasingly complex patterns. Behavioral reformation happening across the entire cohort. He whispered, documenting every moment with the precision of someone who knew this data would either redeem him or destroy him. Probably both. Kael'thas activated the priority channel to High Station Command. Sir, we need to revise everything. The threat assessment was backwards. The response took longer than it should have. When it came, the senior authority's voice carried the weight of someone whose entire strategic doctrine was crumbling. Explain. The predator cubs are not extinction-level predators, Kael'thas said, each word deliberate. They are sapient species demonstrating high behavioral plasticity and social learning capacity. The historical classification was based on defensive aggression from traumatized juveniles, not inherent predatory nature. Current assessment: species capable of peaceful integration with appropriate behavioral protocols. Another long silence. Then, this violates the Treaty of Kashai. The legal framework specifically prohibits the reclassification of any species marked as extinction-level threat without a full council vote. Olivia's voice came through clearly. So, your laws prevent you from learning the truth? Kael'thas turned to her, and something in his expression had shifted. Not quite respect. Too much dignity had been sacrificed for that. But something close. Professional admiration meeting paradigm collapse. You're very good at making impossible things sound like simple oversights. Vexthul presented the data to the council with the precision of someone who had just realized his life's work needed to be completely rewritten. The predator cubs display behavioral plasticity consistent with high-intelligence sapient species, not mindless predators. Neural reorganization in response to environmental stimuli, social bonding mechanisms, language development, evidence of intentional problem-solving and emotional regulation. The council had to acknowledge it. 300 years of military doctrine, built on a foundation of fear-based classification that had no basis in actual evidence. An entire civilization that had constructed walls against neighbors instead of predators. "New contact protocols," Olivia said, consulting with Kael'thas directly now. "What works with Earth animals?" "Approach slow," she continued. "Speak calm. Respect their space. Offer trust first. Don't come in assuming the worst." Kael'thas actually implemented them. Station procedures, revised in real time, moving from containment doctrine to integration framework. The cubs responded immediately, their stress levels continuing to drop as they realized that the universe around them wasn't trying to destroy them. They were simply trying to understand them. "How did you know this would work?" Zara asked, watching as a second cub began playing with a simple toy that 2 hours ago would have been incinerated as a potential contamination vector. "Every species wants the same thing," Olivia said simply. "To not be scared. Just had to remember that." Kael'thas watched her from across the lab. The human crouched down, one cub climbing her shoulder while another attempted to climb her other arm, both of them making soft, contented sounds. Something in his expression shifted again. Not quite admiration, not quite shame. Something that looked like the moment a soldier realizes the enemy was never actually the enemy at all. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "You were scared," Olivia corrected. "That's human. Sorry, species-wide tendency. When something frightens you, sometimes it takes a little longer to realize it was frightened too." The cubs continued their play, secure now in the knowledge that the universe around them contained not threats, but possibility. Not termination protocols, but understanding. Behind them, on every monitor in the station, data streamed that would reshape diplomatic relations across the galaxy. But in the laboratory, under the soft light of containment systems now repurposed for protection instead of imprisonment, there was only quiet contentment, and the sound of predators learning, for the first time in 300 years, that they could be something other than feared. The station's operational directives were rewritten in 17 hours. Vex Thul led the effort with the intensity of someone who just discovered that his entire career could either redeem itself or collapse completely. Probably both. Out went the containment protocols. In came the behavioral integration frameworks. Out went the assumption that predatory classification meant predatory nature. In came the radical notion that understanding might actually be more useful than fear. Rule 1. Assume sapience until disproven. Kael'thas read from the new operational directive, his voice carrying something that might have been irony or might have been the sound of a military commander reading instructions that violated 3 centuries of doctrine. Rule 2. Non-aggressive first contact is mandatory. Rule 3. Behavioral specialists must be consulted before any species reclassification. The Military Review Board was an existential crisis. One commander, a grizzled Kaelian whose rank insignia suggested he'd spent 40 years enforcing the old protocols, raised his hand. "Does this mean the Vextul aren't actually territorial hostiles? Because we've had warships positioned on their border for the better part of a generation." Kael'thas paused, long enough that everyone understood the implications. "We're apparently not good at understanding other species." "Or really good at assuming the worst?" Olivia called from somewhere in the background, where she'd been waiting for her consultation to finish. Her tone was conversational, almost sympathetic. The tone of someone watching others realize they'd been afraid of their own shadows for 300 years. Zara was officially assigned as liaison to the new Predator-Cub integration program. At 17 years of age, she became the youngest researcher to lead a species integration initiative. Vex Thul established his new research program with the fervor of a convert. Behavioral integration protocols for previously classified threats. The military adjusted its strategy from assume hostile, proceed with weapons, to assume intelligent, proceed with caution. Trade routes with previously avoided species began opening. The economic implications were staggering. The diplomatic implications were transformative, all triggered by one human treating a scary creature like a thinking being. Olivia checked her watch. "Speaking of which," she said, pulling her arm gently free from a cub that had decided her hand was an excellent place to rest its head. "Doesn't someone have a shift change?" Zara looked up from her monitoring station, genuine confusion crossing her features. "You're leaving?" "My break ended 20 minutes ago," Olivia said matter-of-factly, standing and stretching. "I'm supposed to be organizing the supply station, unless you need me to—" "You're leaving," Kael'thas interrupted, his voice carrying notes of something between amazement and disbelief. "To organize supplies after revolutionizing our entire species relationship framework?" Olivia shrugged, which caused the cub still climbing her shoulder to make a delighted chirping sound. Revolutionary insights don't get lunch prepared. Besides, the cubs are calm now. They'll be fine with someone else. She reached up and gave the cub a final scratch. "You're going to learn so much, buddy. Be nice to Zara, okay?" The cub made a whining sound, a genuinely sad sound, as she headed toward the exit. "It's calling for you," Zara said softly, almost helplessly. "It'll adjust," Olivia called back, not slowing down. "They're learning animals. New friend every day is a good day for them." Vexthul muttered to himself. She's walking away like she solved a minor operational inefficiency. Kael'thas watched her go, something settling in his expression. Perhaps she did. From a certain perspective. In the council chambers, the emergency session continued through the night cycle. The implications rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water, spreading to every edge of known space. The Kael Tul, considered hostile invaders for 50 years, might actually be diplomatic. The Zemoth, assumed to have no emotional capacity, might actually be quite sophisticated. Every species classification potentially needed revision. An ambassador from a distant sector voiced what everyone was thinking. "We're going to have to contact every species we've avoided contact with and apologize, aren't we?" "The humans showed more insight in 3 hours," Vexthul said, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of study suddenly becoming context instead of authority. "Then we developed in 3 centuries of study." A senior council member leaned back in his seat, processing the cosmic scope of what had just been revealed. "We built our entire civilization, avoiding what the human embraced immediately." "To be fair," Kael'thas added quietly, "humans have less to lose. Their species isn't 3,000 years old with established protocols." "Exactly," the council member said. "Their civilization is young enough to see the obvious." Zara whispered to a junior officer beside her, "What if we've been wrong about everything?" The junior officer, watching the monitors as cubs played peacefully in pens designed for containment, responded simply, "Then everything changes." Olivia returned to the supply station humming. Her colleague, a station technician named Rahix, who'd worked maintenance for the better part of a decade, looked up from inventory. "Heard you solved a diplomatic crisis." "Nah," Olivia said, pulling on her work gloves. "Just explained basic animal behavior to people who forgot how to observe." "You're in the news feeds across 3 sectors." "Great." Olivia grabbed a data pad and began scanning boxes. "Now can someone help me count these inventory boxes? We're short on thermal regulators, and I need to file a requisition before the evening shift ends." In the laboratory, Zara watched monitors as cubs played peacefully in their pens. In the research division, Vex Thule took first notes for a completely new research paradigm. In the command center, Kael'thas approved the diplomatic envoy to species previously marked as hostile. The station continued its night cycle, rotating through artificial, sunrise and sunset, recycling air and water and decisions made in real time. But something fundamental had shifted. One human woman had made it impossible to see the universe the same way. She'd done it by being competent, pragmatic, and fundamentally certain that understanding was more useful than fear. She'd saved a civilization by refusing to participate in the apocalypse it was so certain was inevitable. And now she had to count inventory boxes. She had dinner plans, too. Apparently, they made excellent pasta in the station's secondary cafeteria, and she had a shift break coming up in about an hour. The cosmos adjusted around her without asking permission. She didn't particularly notice.